Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, a good day to all, wherever you are. So I'll start our session, our webinar session today by setting the scene. All right, I'm Eileen Tan from UC Science Malaysia. I'm one of the steering committee for Marine Life 2030. Let us go into the session now. Allow me to share my presentation. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. I hope that everyone can see my presentation. Okay. So I would like to set the scene on to tell you more about Marine Life 2030 under this webinar. All right. So let me bring you a bit on the background of how marine life come about. So it all started with, as we go along the timeline, the journey, we started in 1991 under Goose. And from there, we go into Census of Marine Life. As following to that, in year 2014, it has expanded into MBORD, which is more focusing to standardize and integrate data to understand marine biodiversity and ecosystem function. Following to that, in 2021, Marine Life 2030 has been initiated with a partnership of MBORD, GOOS, IOOS, OBPS, WCMB, and others with the vision to transform observation and forecasting of marine life for the benefits of all people. All right. And we look at why there is a need for us to evolve and to grow into Marine Life 2030. Because if you look at it now, climate change, due to climate change, population growth, and we have actually real poor biodiversity knowledge, not only in developing countries. In fact, this is an issue that is worldwide of concern. Yeah. So the ocean, we know that the ocean is a home for more than 200 species, but then, and also the economic value of the ocean is more than US 3 trillion, expected to be in 2030, in line with a billion people in developing countries, which is depending on fish for their primary source of protein. And we knowing that the ocean is also providing 350 million jobs. Yeah. For following to that, you can see here how is this slide is a bit heavy, but it shows how are we in line with the United Nations UN Decade of Ocean Science, and how we link with other partners, yeah, in terms of GOOS, MBORD, and OBPS. You can see is how marine life is connected with the same mission, building a coherent, consistent, coordinated ocean observing system to assess the state and trends of ocean biological resources. So today we have speakers would share with us of various components of this whole network under Marine Life 2030. Yeah, so you can see this is also a slide showing the framework, the Ocean Decade framework, that where Marine Life 2030 is been endorsed, a program endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade and our partners. There's a list of partners, and if you look at the summary, we have 37 international academic institutions, 5 international governmental organizations, 34 non-governmental organizations, 14 national government partners, and 9 sector partners. And we are still, Marine Life 2030 is a still growing entity, and more partners are joining hands with us to move the agenda of UN Decade. Yeah. And if you look here, in terms of our mission, yeah, goals, in general, we recognize our dependence on diversity of life, transform observation and forecasting of marine life for the benefits of all people, and our goals is connect science to the user needs. Yeah, because many times science is there. It's just that how do we translate that into actionable solutions? So marine life would like to play that role, build technology capacity. We have one speaker, Masa. He will be talking about EOVs, and we'll be more focusing on standardized, coordinate marine life monitoring, broadening the participation and mainstream applications of biodiversity information. And our stakeholders is an open network. We welcome whoever interested to be in and share the mission and move forward together. And engagement strategy is by co-designing for implementation, which is very important because a lot of time, it's a lot of workshop training be conducted, but it stays in the platform without translating it to the ground. So implementation is very important to Marine Life 2030 management and financing. Setting indicators, standards, and technology applications based on the capacity and affordability of the member states that is involved. And these are all the endorsed and affiliated projects and activities under the Marine Life 2030. We have additionally 30 projects under endorsed and affiliated to us, and more to be announced. Yeah. And of course, leading to it, Marine Life 2030 play an active role in preparing the white paper on Ocean Decade Challenge 2, which is Ocean Decade Vision 2030. Work with the Ocean Decade for endorsed action. And for this white paper on Challenge 2 is on the main challenge is protect and restore ecosystem and biodiversity. So we have quarterly network meetings with affiliated projects. Yeah. So with that, this is about in a nutshell about Marine Life 2030. And this is information, a page to show the contact person if you want, are interested, or you want to know more and want to be involved or play a more active role in Marine Life 2030. This is the contact number, and you can go into the email and you can look into our website. Yeah. So with that, I stop. I stop sharing about the Marine Life 2030. We will keep all the question and discussion to the end of the session. All right. So with that, I would like to invite our next speaker on setting up the scene. We would like to invite Professor Masahiro Nakoka from Hokkaido University to talk about essential verbal framework. We have touched upon a little bit, which is under Marine Life 2030 for observing marine life. Over to you, Prof. Masa.
Okay, thank you, Eileen. Okay, because time is limited, I will move to my presentation. Hope I can share the screen properly. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Thank you.
let me start. Hello, everyone. My name is Masa Nakaoka of Hokkaido University, Japan. I'm working for one of the co-chairs of MBON, Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, and today I will give a talk about essential variable frameworks for observing marine life. Okay, the main message of my talk is EVBs, essential biodiversity variables, actually a time series of EOV, and other EOV is an essential ocean variable, and other observation of the model result and the location of over an area. And so, as shown in this data cube, time series maps by species. Time, space, and species is actually some of the output we really want to create from the by EBVs. Okay, there's essential variables are developed in coordination between UN agencies, including IOCs and OBs and GOOS, and GEO, and it is GeoBone and MBone belongs to this group, and they are actually coordinated and trying to establish EOBs. The reason why we need these EOBs or ECBs or EBBs framework is for promotion of ocean best practice, interoperability, standardized operational collection of observations, assessment, and reporting. Okay, so there's several different types of essential variables. First, essential climate variables are created, actually defined by it is ECBs for the global climate change, actually observations and actions. Then, second comes essential ocean variables, EOVs by goods, and then third one is essential biodiversity variables, EBVs. So it actually developed in this order. Okay, this picture already shown by Eileen's presentation, but we have a lot of tight collaboration between goods and MBOM and other parties for the requirement of Marine Life 2030 under the Ocean Decade programs. We need to develop efficient and effective observation systems, and the data output will be make open to public by OBIS and other data providers, and this data will be shared by the variety of different types of stakeholders and action policies for better observation of the marine life. Okay, the EOBs are developed and promoted by these goods expert panels. And there's three components, physics, biogeochemistry, and biology and ecosystems. It's called BioEco groups. And there's already established EOVs for a variety of physical variables, biogeochemical variables, and biology and ecosystem variables, which I can't explain each in this short talk. And then these EOVs are actually linked with essential climate variables. This part, it is actually really important for the observing the changing climate, global in relation to global climate change. And for biodiversity part, EOVs are linked with EBVs developed by GeoBone. And MBON is actually a thematic group of GeoBone. And sorry, it is very small picture. So some of the essential ocean variables related to biodiversity are coming to EBVs in GeoBone framework. And there's small font, but there's 6 important variables. Actually, topics of variables, it is genetic composition, species population, species traits, and community composition, ecosystem structure, and ecosystem function. These essential biodiversity variables should be actually shown, and data should be collected as in a data cube, which I mentioned in the first slides. And MBON and the associate members are now trying hard to establish this system, which is strongly related to the partnership with Blue Planet. Okay, this is actually second last slide. So the relationship was actually shown between EOVs and EBVs. It's really complicated, but we have a lot of different variables to observe ocean organisms, and there's EBBs developed by GeoBone. So there's a lot of commons, and actually it is quite complex links, but we can translate these 2 variables for each direction. Okay, this is the last slide. So as a summary, we should say, again, I should repeat, EBVs are time series of EOV and other observations model result. And we are trying to develop the best, efficient and effective framework to observe these variables efficiently, which is really essential for developing good practice in ocean observation, conservation, policy making, and so on. Okay, that's my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nakoka. Thank you for your presentation. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Catherine Tattersall. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. To present her talk on progress on aligning biodiversity data to standards. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to take a very data-centric view in my presentation because I'm talking about OBIS, and we provide a data infrastructure for marine biodiversity data. I'm not running my slides, so if I just ask next slide, could you move on for me, please? So next. For those who aren't familiar with what OBIS holds in our data repository, we're an aggregator of marine biodiversity data, and we're a global aggregator of marine biodiversity data. We have 132 million occurrence records aggregated from 5,362 at the last count data sets, and covering more than 194,000 different marine species. If you look in the top right-hand corner of this slide, you'll see that there's this really rich species map showing where we have data and also demonstrating where we don't have data in the OBIS databases at the moment. Data has been provided from 99 countries, of those 21 small island developing states, and we have 16 data contributors from Africa, and over 200 scientific papers per year written citing use of OBIS data. Next. I'll glance over this because other people have talked about the relationships between Goose and MBON, but we did want to highlight that OBIS is engaged in that space. As you know, we also participate in some Horizon Europe projects, the Marco Polo project, the BioEco Ocean project, and we have a very strong focus on trying to capture the information about functional groups, habitat state, and cross-disciplinary EOVs for biology and ecosystems. Next. To do that, we use this data model, and we call it the exploded star. So, even though we talk about data, and we do get very excited about it. It's our OBIS data model that we've been using since 2017 and allows us to record information about a sampling event. So the blue and the two blue parts of this slide, a sampling event and an occurrence of a species, but also supplementary information. So we call it extended measurement or fact. It's the information either about that event, the habitat, or the environmental data. And we can also record eDNA data and species taxonomy that is derived from eDNA data. We have a broad diversity of different types of variables, environmental data, and parameters associated with observations, so the length of a fish or the gender of a fish, the sex of a fish can be recorded in this data model as well. If you want to have a look at this later, just get in touch and I can send this diagram through to you and describe it in more detail. Next slide, please. There are two main components to the way that we record data. So event core is a data structure that captures information about a sampling event, and occurrence core is a data structure that captures information about an occurrence or an observation of a marine species. This thing, EMOF, is all of the supplementary information that can sit around those. We have many, many more occurrence core records than we do event core records, which makes sense because if you go out and sample, you'll see a lot of individuals. Also, the way we structure the data depends on the methods that are used by the researchers who collect data. We also have that supplementary supplementary information about the sampling event or about the specimen. And in fact, we've got a lot of that. And most of it is about the events that happen. So we have 174 million measurements or facts, and 12 million event records. But if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see that the vast majority of supplementary information we have is about those events where data is collected. And this is a really powerful part of the way that OBIS structures our data. Next, please. If you're not familiar with this data structure, it can feel a little overwhelming when you first encounter it. I know some people here are deeply familiar with it, and some people perhaps have never interacted with the OBIS environmental data model before. So if you haven't, we've prepared a whole lot of training resources that can be used both for structuring and submitting data to OBIS with the support of the OBIS Secretariat and the OBIS nodes, but also accessing and using the data. So we have a comprehensive OBIS manual online, and we provide example dataset formats for 7 different taxa groups in that manual. We have a self-paced course through Ocean Teacher Global Academy, and we've had 47 OBIS certified participants who have graduated from that course, and some people who are enrolled in it now. And 15 of those participants are OBIS node staff. We ask that every regional OBIS node and every thematic OBIS node does complete that training, because we want the people who are helping researchers to deliver their data to be across the best practices in the space. And we also have some YouTube how-to tutorials which are available to anyone at any time. You can find them by looking for OBIS in YouTube. Next slide, please. This diagram is complex, but I really wanted to put it in because I wanted to show you the power of the way that we manage data in OBIS. We're building an essential ocean variable monitoring knowledge graph, which will allow us to link information between SOPs and data sets, and monitoring programs and data sets, and data products and data sets. Again, I'll point you to our technical support person for if you really want to dive into this and how to implement this. But it is really, really exciting. The specifications can be used to exchange information between different systems, like between OBIS and between Ocean Info Hub, or between ODIS and between the Goose BioEco portal as well. It lets us see the status of biological ocean observations in real time. Next slide. Another thing that we're doing at the moment is working on controlled vocabularies. We're co-developing guidelines with BODC, and we're also building a decision tree and video tutorials to help people know how to use a controlled vocabulary to describe their data set. There'll be an interactive decision tree. We'll document the logic behind the decisions that we make in OBIS really clearly, and BODC is working on semantic analyzers that will also help people to suggest the vocabulary, and we'll establish a Goose-endorsed vocabulary for the BioEco EOVs. When you come in with a data set, it's really easy to describe it in a consistent way, which makes data far more interoperable. I'm out of time, so last slide is just the closing slide. I'm really happy to talk to anyone in more depth at any time, or point you to the people within OBIS who are working on any of these specific projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Very informative. And then I think there is one questions in the chat box that address to training opportunities. You can answer it on live or type it on the chat box. Okay. Thank you, Catherine, again. Now let's move on to the next subject, which is the projects or programs contributing to marine life 2030. So with that, I would like to first invite Patricia Miloslavich, sorry if I pronounced your name wrongly, from the Australian Antarctic Division, to talk about IPBS report on methodological assessment on monitoring biodiversity and nature's contribution to people. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Eileen, and thanks everyone for being here. So as Eileen just said, I'm the program lead for the East Antarctic Monitoring Program, and I am also one of the 3 co-chairs of the IPBES monitoring assessment. Can I have the next slide, please? So to introduce you to what IPBES is the Intergovernmental Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. It's a policy science platform for actually how to deliver scientific knowledge and to have policy applications. Its mission is then to strengthen the knowledge foundations to make better policy through science that will allow the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and the long-term human well-being and sustainable development. As I mentioned before, it's an independent intergovernmental body. It was established in 2012 by the governments and currently has 147 members. Can I have the next one, please? So since its inception, the IPBES work program has been quite broad, making assessments to establish the knowledge base for decision making. So in its first decade of existence, from its inception in 2012 until 2023, it made 11 reports of different assessments, and including authors from around 28,000 people from all over the world. IPBES not only brings scientists, it brings also social scientists. So natural science combines the knowledge of natural science, social science, and it also brings the indigenous local knowledge. So of these assessments here, you can look at one in which I participated, which was the 2019 Global Assessment for Biodiversity Status. So can I have the next one, please? So this was the last decade program, and then for this decade, the rolling program up to 2030, as adopted by the IPBES VII Assembly in 2019, would include additional topics to be completed and that were approved by IPBES X. The first one was to assess the interlinkages upon biodiversity, water, food, health, energy, and climate change, what is called the Nexus Assessment. The second one was about transformative change. It's another assessment that will be completed this year. A third topic is on business, measuring the business impact and dependence on biodiversity, and this one will be completed by next year. The fourth one was a second global assessment that is envisioned to be completed on 2028, and the process to recruit the authors will start very soon. So if you're interested in participating as an expert, there's a process and you need to be nominated by your country, but please get in contact with your focal points and request them to nominate you for this assessment. The fifth topic was monitoring, which is the one undergoing at this moment, and in which I will talk to you a little bit more. And the sixth one was on spatial planning and ecological connectivity. Can I have the next one, please? So the objectives of this work program, it's not just to assess knowledge, it's also to build capacity. So it also includes fellowships. It has a fellowship program. So we have fellows that are selected for the assessment and actually help the authors and the coordinated lead authors to draft the assessment. It's also about strengthening the knowledge foundations of using data management, the knowledge generation, catalysis, and indigenous and local knowledge. And of these, those that are marked there on the left with an asterisk also have additional task forces. It's also about supporting policy. So these four are topics that are actually supported by the assessment. And then comes the next step, which is part of the objectives of the program, which is to communicate and engage the results with policymakers and with all the stakeholders, and also to try to improve the effectiveness. All of this addressing the IPBES conceptual framework, which is this graph that you have on the right, which has 6 interlinked elements that contribute to that social ecological system that operates at different scales temporally and spatially. So the 6 elements are nature, of course, nature's contribution to people, the good quality of lives and anthropogenic assets, the institutions and governments and other indirect drivers, and the direct drivers All of these that change through time and provide baseline trends and scenarios, and also that interact across a spatial scale. Can I have the next one, please? So let's look now and let's go to the monitoring assessment, and let's see the next one. So the monitoring assessment, can I have the next one, please? Has three co-chairs, Álvaro de Oliveira D'Antona from Brazil, myself from Australia and Venezuela, and Andrew Gonzalez from Canada. And each of us represents a different topic. So I will make sure that the marine assessment, the marine topic is included. Andrew is very terrestrially focused. He has worked, he has chaired Geo1 for a long time. And Álvaro de Oliveira is a social scientist. And here you have the list of who will be the CLAs or coordinating leading authors for each of the 4 chapters that this assessment will have. So it's 3 co-chairs, 12 coordinating lead authors. So for each chapter, you have a representative at the coordinating level representing the marine environment, terrestrial environment, and the social scientist. 51 authors, 8 review editors, and 8 fellows, so 2 contributing to each chapter. And the technical support unit will be hosted by McGill University in Canada. Can I have the next one, please? So about the objectives of the monitoring assessment is basically to gather knowledge that is needed to support national and global efforts to monitor biodiversity and the nature's contribution to people and the direct and underlying causes of the observed changes, but also to monitor progress towards the goals and targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in support of a balanced and enhanced implementation of the CBD, on the Convention on Biological Diversity. So this is a global assessment, and it will provide information relevant to all biogeographic and oceanographic zones at all scales, from subnational to global. Can I have the next one? So the 4 chapters of this assessment, the first one will be to set the scene. It will define the framework and how the assessment will support the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The second chapter will assess the data needs. What is the data needed for the monitoring framework? It will include including indigenous local knowledge, including policy and planning, and again, from local to national. The third chapter is about assessing the challenges that we face to implement biodiversity monitoring to meet the needs. So what coverage there is, what infrastructure, what inclusion. And then the final chapter is very forward-looking. It's options for strengthening the national and regional monitoring capacities, assessing the benefits and value of international cooperation. So in the next slide, I will go now in detail for each of these chapters. The first one is to define the purpose and the intended audience, how the report will address monitoring needs, and how it will support the implementation of the monitoring framework. And all of this will be done within the IPBES framework that I mentioned that has these 6 interlinked components. The next one, please. So chapter 2 about assessing the data needs will assess what data there is out there, what indicators and what models are needed to inform the implementation of actions towards achieving the goals and the targets of the Kunming-Montreal GBF. So assessment means that we will look into all the literature. We will make interpretations, analysis, but we will not gather new data, nor will we do new models. So the data needs here that will be assessed, and also what possible other indicators that we can use, but also what are the methodological challenges, including the aggregation of national data into global indicators. And I just want to follow up on Catherine's excellent presentation that OBIS really is a tool that will be absolutely critical and very, very useful for this assessment. And needless to say, there is nothing as similar at that quality for the terrestrial environment. So we will also include here different system of knowledge like indigenous people and local communities to support the application of these indicators to inform policy and planning at different levels. Next one, please. Chapter 3 then is about assessing the challenges that we have. So we have some data, we have systems that collect and mobilize them, but well, what are these? What is the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of the data we have? What is the geographic and taxonomic coverage? What are the gaps? What are the biases? What capacity we have? What capability? What infrastructure? What methods are used in situ and remote sensing? What institutional support there is, governance structures, and funding resources? And finally, I've tried to assess the impacts of the means of implementation in developing countries to actually support the implementation of this decision of the Kunming-Montreal framework. And finally, the looking forward chapter, which is chapter 4, next one, please, is, well, what options we have to develop national and regional biodiversity monitoring capacities. What international cooperation is needed to support the needs of all, especially in developing countries and small island developing states. What financial, institutional, and human capacity is needed, and what are the options to meet these needs? What opportunities there are for new technologies, for economic costs and the benefits of monitoring, and finally to identify pathways that will enhance scientific and technical cooperation, capacity building, and voluntary technology transfer on mutually agreed terms. So can I have the next one, please? The timeline for this, well, we have started just very recently. We only had an online meeting, but the co-chairs have been recruited. The coordinated leading authors have been recruited. The lead authors have been recruited. So all the team, the 80 plus people have been recruited. We have had a first meeting, and we are drafting now what are called the sentence outlines that will become the skeleton of the assessment. And our first author meeting face-to-face will be soon in the end of November, in which we all get together and actually start drafting. There will be a lot of cross-fertilization across chapters, even if the authors are allocated to each of them, because one flows from the other. So this cross-fertilization is needed to avoid any duplication of information, but actually guarantee that there's a flow. And next year there's a meeting to actually draft a summary for policymakers, which along with the assessment is presented for approval by plenary by December 2026 after a formal process of review. And I think the next one is my last one. So yes, you can scan that QR code, which will take you to more information about the assessment. And thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for sharing the information as well as the opportunity. For those who have questions to ask, you can either put it in the chat box, a Q&A chat box, or following to all the presenters, we have a discussion sessions that you can raise it live here. So without further ado, let's now invite Ana Lara Lopez from GOOSE, IOC UNESCO, to present her talk on BioEco Ocean, co-creating transformative pathways to biological and ecosystem ocean observations. Over to you, Ana.
Thank you, Lynn. So I'm Ana. I'm actually the International Project Officer for the BioEco panel for GOOSE. But now what I'm going to present is actually one of the projects that it's being funded by the European Union, where GOOSE is actually participating in the BioEco panel, which is towards a blueprint for integrated ocean science. Excuse my voice, I'm just having some issues with my throat. So can we go to the next one, please? So this project aims to advance BioEco ocean observations and in doing so, to try to operationalize and start coordinating better and communicating better. And it is using the essential ocean variables as a basis. It's the framework that it will be using. And at its core, it's the development of a blueprint. The ultimate goal of BioEco Ocean is to enhance the ocean observing capacity, to advance our scientific understanding of the ocean, but also to help management and increase the utility of the ocean observation. So make reality of observe once, use many times. And for that, we need coordination and interoperability. So in this project, we're going to be basically looking at how we can better coordinate, and we're going to be using co-creating processes to develop this blueprint that we hope will be a tool that it's going to be very useful for the ocean observing community. Can I have the next one, please? So as I said, at its core, we have the blueprint for integrated ocean science. And this is going to be a tool that it's going to be question-based support tool. It will help guide and encourage a more holistic thinking about how we undertake ocean observing. It will look at all the ocean observing value chain and look at the connectivity between all these different elements and where we can improve, where it is advantageous to collaborate, where communication should be happening, and how we can enable that so we can have an integrated approach to ocean observing for biology and ecosystems. Next one, please. I'm going to try to go fast so we have enough time to discuss. But some of the key project objectives is to enhance the operational global observing and forecasting system by prioritizing capacity building for diverse stakeholders. So the intention is to include all stakeholders from the start, and and with them co-create this process in developing this blueprint. And there is a component that will be developing teaching courses, so we can actually, through the Ocean Teacher Global Academy, if I'm not wrong, yes, Ocean Teacher Global Academy, which will be open for everyone. So next one, please. Another key objective is to accelerate and improve the implementation and use of the EOVs for biology and ecosystems. So as I said, it is going to be the basis of of this project, and it will be implementing and using some of these EOVs and basically test them in the field while they're collecting information to improve scientific knowledge. They will be using this framework to better coordinate and to have interoperable data. So the idea in here is to demonstrate all these, like how the ocean observing value chain can actually improve in how it works, and through collaboration, co-creation, and coordination, we can generate the information that it's interoperable and that can help carry out global assessments. We cannot do it unless we are well coordinated and we have actually data that is standardized and that can be comparable. So we'll be using this framework that Gus has to improve on how we undertake ocean observing for biology and ecosystem. Next one, please. Another key project objective is to harness the observation networks to improve the scientific understanding, and looking at where the knowledge gaps are, and then improving that understanding, going to the field, doing all the observations, doing pretty much implementing the ocean observing value chain, and in doing so, looking at all this connectedness and trying to connect all those elements that are where we see it is lacking, and that we can actually push forward this and try to operationalize biological ocean observing. Next one, please. So as I said, at the core of this project is the development of the blueprint for integrated ocean science, which it is going to be trying to look at improving how we do things. So you can see here, you know, from a sort of like a loop-like ocean observing value chain to one that it's, you know, connected in all the elements to talking to each other. How it's gonna end up, we still don't know, because we're actually testing that by basically undertaking all these observations and using the EOV framework. Next one, please. So the project has different components. The co-creative process in the blueprint you can see in here, but there's also 6 living labs. And these living labs are going to be undertaking research using different essential ocean variables. Some of them will be looking at seagrass, others will be looking at fish and macroalgae, and some will be looking at the modeling side of things and how all these are connected. That we have also component on capacity development, as well as communication and outreach. And in all that also there's going to be a very big component on data management and data requirements for data management. And OBPS, as Kath mentioned, it is part of this project as well. So it is an integral and core part of the project. Next one, please. So, as I mentioned, the essential ocean variables are going to be used because this is a framework that promotes coordination, and the solution to have comparable ocean data that can actually enable its use for global assessments, but also at, for assessments at national level, regional level, having interoperable, comparable, open and fair data, it's going to be beneficial. So you can see here the essential ocean variable specification sheets, and it basically is a guide on how you can contribute to this global observing system, how you can observe and how you can collect ocean observations, and how you can treat your data and the data management requirements, so you can actually be part of this ocean observing, and how you can contribute your information and your work to global ocean observing. So these specification sheets currently are being updated. So there is some work going on with for each of the essential ocean variables for biology and ecosystem, but it also is going to be undertaken for the other disciplines. So we're currently undergoing this update to have a more up-to-date information on how we collect observations. Next one, please. And it's an important part of this project. So these specification sheets are going to be basically used and tested through the living labs. So the living labs, while they're carrying their research, they're going to be using the information that is within that specification sheet and that guidance. And it's going to be an iterative process where there will be further refinements as well. And through this co-creative process as well, the different living labs are going to be testing the different parts of the ocean observing value chain to see where we can make improvements, and we can actually raise the technical readiness level of the biological and ecosystem observations. So we can have some of the important outcomes will be that, you know, blueprint as a tool, the implementation of essential ocean variables, as well as I mentioned, there is modeling components on how to use the data that will be improving the model skill as well, while you're carrying out research, and how we can better operationalize biological and ecosystem ocean observing. Next one, please. So connecting the dots, as you can see in this value chain, is basically all the elements of the value chain. And, you know, in the application in society, there's some needs for information and for decision making that and to help also resource management for of marine resources, as well as multilateral agreements and assessments, such as the one that Patricia mentioned, that will be basically requiring information. So you start looking at, okay, is the information that we currently have filling and fulfilling those needs or not? What can we do? So you're evaluating, you know, those informational needs and reviewing, okay, you know, what are the drivers of change? Are there any new technologies that can help us improve our knowledge? What are the best practices that exist in there that can help us through this through this process? And as you go into the planning, who else is doing what? You know, similar observations. Where, when can we coordinate? How do we? How can we actually know which other groups are actually undertaking this? How is the data management happening? Is it fair? Are standards being followed? Are there control vocabularies? How can this data feed into models, analysis, assessments that can then produce the information and the products that management and decision makers need and end user needs? So it is the whole process that we've been looking at and building together with all stakeholders involved, building that the blueprint. And we're hoping that this blueprint can be applicable. Not only, this is a European project, but the idea is we're actually getting and asking for input from, you know, global input from other members of the community from other regions. And we hope that this blueprint can be applicable and useful for other people around the world. Next one, please. So there's a few questions we were asked to provide or to answer, so we can, after the presentations, we can go into the discussion and some of the things that at least we have identified the major needs to help define or coordinate an operational capability for biology and ecosystems. What will be the priorities? In there, basically, we identify the need for fair and open data, good data management standards. How do we convince the community to open their data, to follow some standards, and to follow best practice so we can actually carry out those essential assessments and to really meet the challenges that the ocean and biodiversity currently faces. Having comparable observations, we have a good framework with the essential ocean variables. So we can implement that framework for coordination and collaboration, then we can probably meet those challenges. And we are just starting, so the project started in February 2024, so we will be really keen to learn from the other projects what they have, their experience has been, so we can take on those learnings. Opening communication channels with and opportunities to communities outside the field, I think it's something that we need to do. IPBES is a really good example where they're actually involving is transdisciplinary. So how can we implement that? And concrete ideas of what could be done is, you know, socializing and obviously I'm sort of speaking also with my goose hat here, socializing the use of the EOV framework, so we can better coordinate and manage our observations. We're hoping that the good specification sheet provides good guidance for people to contribute, and, you know, making your monitoring program visible through sharing the metadata into a BioEco portal so people can see you and we know who is monitoring what and where, and we can easily identify gaps. Next one, please. And this is my final one. So how can you participate to learn more about BioEco Ocean? Please go to our website. There will be workshops. There's going to be upcoming seminars, etc. So we'll like to have some input. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I hope your voice get better. Thank you very much. So let's call upon our last presenter, Aaron Egger from the Kelp Forest Alliance, to share about Kelp Forest Challenge. Over to you, Aaron.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. Thanks for having us on the call, and looking forward to chatting a bit more about kelp forest conservation restoration and the data collection behind that. So just as the presentation loads, I'll tell you a bit more about the organization and the project, and that'll hopefully give some scope and understanding of how that links in with data standards and practices and such. But very briefly, the Kelp Forest Alliance is a global network of kelp forest practitioners, restoration experts, protection experts, looking to protect and restore kelp forests in 25 countries around the world. So we go next slide. Kelp forests is just a bit of a kind of background and a plug that I always like to start with to reflect on, even amongst the ocean-minded people, really are one of these dominant habitats that we have across the world, but are often really quite forgotten. So we have kelp forests most places outside of the tropics, so that puts them next door to 740 million people that live within 50 kilometers of a kelp forest, and they are really important, essential habitat on those rocky coastlines in temperate, subtropical, arctical regions of our world. Next slide. And we have an emerging understanding of the benefits that are related to kelp forests. So some new research that we completed last year suggests that between water purification, carbon absorption, and fisheries production, kelp forests are producing between $64,000 and $147,000 per hectare per year in potential ecosystem service values. And so we often use this as a sort of communication point to remove that forgotten forest component and get people working and trying to protect and restore these ecosystems within the context of large international initiatives, say like 30 by 30. Next slide. But beyond that, we try to focus really on everything connected to a kelp forest, which is a whole lot when you start to get into it. Like many other marine ecosystems, it's not just the carbon, it's not just the fisheries, it's the stories, it's the culture, it's the day-to-day experience. And so we are very data-driven, but we're also very community-driven and experience-driven with a lot of the narratives that we tell around kelp forest conservation. Next slide. At the same time, kelp is facing many, many threats. Kelp are facing many, many threats around the world, and the best estimates suggest that about 40 to 60% of kelp forests have been degraded in the last 50 years through a combination of overharvest, raising sea temperature, pollution, and increases in sea urchin abundance, which are a key consumer of kelp forests that often balloon in population when their predators are lost. Next slide. And to date, we haven't seen a whole lot of progress in kelp conservation. Restoration is really at its infancy. And I'll speak to a challenge that we've set to set targets for kelp conservation in just a little bit. But what we see to date in the last sort of 56 years of modern kelp restoration is about 20,000, 19,000 hectares of restored kelp forest, and about 16% of global kelp habitat is protected, though only about 2% is highly protected. So we're really at the infancy in this conservation movement for these ecosystems. Next slide. And to counter that, to sort of address that gap, we're working on increasing appreciation and support and understanding and connection to kelp forests that can lead forward into funding. So we're based in Sydney, Australia, and just as a brief example, kelp forest ecosystems receive about 1% of the funding for conservation research, as does the Great Barrier Reef, despite the fact that 2/3 of Australians live next to a kelp forest and a fraction live next to the Great Barrier Reef. So with that lack of appreciative support, there's often a lack of funding that we're then trying to increase, while also providing knowledge and expertise to allow for the informed and ethical protection, management, and restoration of these ecosystems. So trying to address these barriers through our work. Next slide. And essentially that's what we do as an organization. We're a not-for-profit that tries to advance the protection and restoration of kelp forests, as well as the benefits and connections that they provide to people. And it's very, very community-driven, very ground up. That's the alliance part of it is working with the people working on the ground and living in and next to kelp forests. Next slide. So to date, we have, the slide's actually a little bit out there, up to about 570 people across 310 organizations in 27 countries that are involved in kelp forest conservation, management, protection, restoration, advocacy, and they constitute the Alliance and the Kelp Forest Alliances. Really is a global movement and initiative that started to come together over the last few years. Next slide. And the key bit to that, getting into the data, is our project platform. So if you go on the kelpforestalliance.com, you can see a world map that has a database of most of the world's kelp restoration projects, as well as the marine protected areas that fall within the kelp forest biome. And so now we're looking to track how much area is protected, how much area is restored, and work towards that 30 by 30 target and increasing those values for kelp forests. Next slide, please. And in addition to that sort of area-based information, we also try to bring together information on all things related to kelp forests, whether that's project data, management tools, organizations, institutions, research papers, art, media, events, people working on kelp conservation, really creating a sort of cohesive ecosystem of information that allows people to explore and understand these ecosystems. Next slide. And with that, we're trying to track the benefits. So we have the global database on restoration projects, and in the past, people have largely just reported on some simple indicators: area restored, size of protected area, maybe the density percent cover of the kelp forest in that area. And now we're working to incentivize and track what really are the benefits that come from protecting or restoring a kelp forest, and this can range across the whole suite of ecosystem functions and services. Next slide. And with that, we are creating data standards, which are actually coming out in 2 days' time, to give people sort of a helping hand in how they collect that information. So the idea will be that we'll have this centralized data repository of area restored, area protected, and associated ecosystem services and functions, as well as the more operational metrics, hours, costs, people involved, and that will be done to a certain data standard to be included in the platform, essentially going forward. Next slide. And we have the opportunity then to pair that with best practice for general sorts of conservation activities. In this case, we produced a restoration guidebook that walks people through the full step, but then links them into that monitoring and data reporting side of things, and really starts again trying to integrate that information and make sure people are able to use it and find it quickly and accessibly. Next slide. And really this then all culminates in the Kelp Forest Challenge. So that's our version of 30 by 30, but for kelp forests, and we've pegged it at 2040, actually, just to give a little bit more time, since we are so far behind the starting line when it comes to kelp restoration. We're only about 2% of the global target that we've set, which is 1 million hectares of kelp forest restored in the next 16 years. So we just thought it's essentially unreasonable, really, unfaithful to try to say we're going to achieve that in the next 6 years. And so we've created our target to protect 3 million hectares, which is about 30% of observed kelp habitat, and restore 1 million hectares, which is about 30% of observed degraded habitat, though both those numbers are subject to change with better data resolution. Next slide. And to date, we've received 28 pledges across 8 countries and about 55,000 hectares pledged for future restoration, while also providing opportunities for other groups or organizations or individuals to get involved, whether they're artists who might be celebrating kelp forests, tech companies looking to innovate ways to do kelp conservation, photographers, media, all finding different ways to get involved and work towards these larger area-based metrics, but recognizing it really is a whole societal level solution that's required in connecting people to these ecosystems. And I suppose speaking a little bit to what we just talked about of how you actually get people to use these data standards and practices and that sort of thing, but it's really about building the community and connecting people in our case. Next slide. And that brings us to the end. Very happy to talk about how we can better integrate what we're doing with these larger international networks and data standards and make sure that they're talking to each other and they're interoperable and all those sorts of good things. But I think there's a really lovely opportunity with the community that we've created to make sure that this information is included in country level planning and is tracked effectively, and that can be used really to inspire and accelerate the protection and restoration of these ecosystems. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to the audience because of skipping a talk, and I have to apologize to Karen for skipping her talk. But now I would like to invite Karen Ivans to share her presentation with all of us. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Eileen, and thanks to the organisers for the opportunity to talk about one of the endorsed projects underneath Marine Life 2030. This is a project that we have had in inception since 2020, and it has been endorsed since 2021 under the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. I'd just like to recognise all of our funders on this project. This is a large, multidisciplinary, multi-year project, and it is supported by a number of different agencies and organisations in Australia that include industry right through to government. What I'm going to talk to you about today is what we are calling the Southeast Australian Marine Ecosystem Survey. Next, please. And before I start, I'd just like to pay my respects to the traditional owners on the land on which I'm presenting this evening, Australian time. This particular photo is really important to us because it actually shows 3 of our Indigenous engagement officers that are part of the project. Part of this project is really ensuring that we are not only progressing science, but we're also building capacity, and we're looking across multiple knowledge systems. So I'd just like to acknowledge the Muwinina people, who are the traditional owners of Nipaluna Lutruwina, which is Hobart, Tasmania, which is where I'm standing on, and also the Palawa people, who are the current custodians of the lands on which I am presenting from. Next, please. So why study the Southeast Australian marine ecosystem? It's a very crowded space. It's been the focus of extensive fishing since the 1930s, but it's also the site of a number of other industries, including shipping and oil and gas, and has recently been declared an area for offshore wind energy development. It's also culturally really significant, being sea country for a number of First Nations people, and it is the site of the oldest network of marine parks in Australia. It is also recognised as a global hotspot, and it is currently estimated to be warming at 4 times the global average. So it's a place of broad significance, but it's also a site of quite substantial change. Next, please. So we also know that the ecosystem is changing. There have been significant declines in a number of commercial fish species that have been observed through time. And although strict management rules have been put in place over a number of years, including spatial closures that basically ban fishing from particular areas of significance for those species in an effort to assist the recovery of these species. No observable trends have been observed. So this suggests that there's some broader changes going on within the system than just those that can be attributed to fishing. Next, please. So back in 2020, a number of researchers at the organisation that I work for, which is called the CSIRO, which is Australia's National Research Agency, started thinking about how we might be able to develop a broad-scale multidisciplinary approach to answering some of the questions around potential change in the ecosystem and start to tease apart some of the drivers for that change, including fishing and climate change. As many of you know, that's not a simple thing to undertake due to the complexities in marine systems, but also because of the interactions between drivers. And this is where incorporating best practices or good practices into projects right from their conception is really important. Your survey design needs to be set up in a robust enough way that it's able to answer questions you are asking regardless of what happens down the track. We know that things don't always go to plan, so you need to have a robust design to be able to tackle the questions that you're asking regardless of what happens. This requires clearly identifying the problem you want to tackle, the associated hypotheses you want to test, how you go about testing those hypotheses, and what observations you need to be able to carry out those tests. In our case, we also was able to access a data set that was collected during the 1990s via a series of surveys through the southeast Australian region. And this is not only a bonus in that we did have a baseline that we could compare to, but it also presents a challenge in that it's only one point in time to undertake a comparison with. Ideally, you want a time series that you can track change through time. But beggars can't be choosers, and so we really needed to think about how we could set up our survey design so that we could make that direct comparison with that point in time that was collected previously 30 years ago. Next, please. So you might be thinking, well, we're going to collect everything given that we've got one shot at this, but that's not actually how you approach things for a number of reasons. Going to sea is really expensive, and I mean really expensive. So you have a limited window of time that you can go to sea, and while you're at sea, there's only a certain number of hours in the day. So you've got to maximize what you're doing while you're out there. Added on top of that is that most vessels have a limited repertoire of gear and also in association capability that they can deploy. And then there's all of the processing and analytical capability that you need to actually turn the observations that you collect at sea into something that you can test your hypotheses with. And it's really, really, really expensive to undertake such an exercise. So we spent a dedicated amount of time qualitatively modelling the ecosystem in the southeast region to understand what were the key elements we needed to sample to be able to pick up perturbations in the system and understand what was driving change in the system. And this was absolutely essential to our survey design. So what I have here in the center of the slide that you're seeing right now is an example of one of the qualitative models we built for each of the commercial species of fish that we wanted to focus on. We had to build one for each of the species because each of the species sits in a different part of the ecosystem. And you can see that they break down the ecosystem into key physical, chemical, and biological components And each of those arrows that you see between those components build in a positive and a negative interaction, so that if you increase or decrease the values in any one of those nodes that you're seeing on the screen, you can actually track what that means for the rest of the system in terms of the change, because you know whether it has a positive or a negative connection with the other elements in that model. And that allows you to then prioritize what are the most important parts of the system that you need to observe and sample. The other thing that was super important for us was to be able to incorporate similar gear types and deployment methods, so that we had the ability to compare apples with apples in terms of what we were sampling now compared to what was sampled in the 1990s. Next, please. So part of that whole process, and really critical to the process, was setting up a good survey design, was also putting in place good operating protocols that support data collection and survey observations. We've been developing these over the last 4 to 5 years, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of having these in place, because they mean that everyone who's involved in the project knows what to do. There's multiple parts that are moving on a survey, and a survey involves multiple disciplines, multiple types of gear deployments that are then deployed multiple times a day. So it's really essential that everyone knows what they're doing, when they're doing it, and what their actions will actually result in. We've also built into our surveys regular toolboxes and briefings, so that there's multiple chances for reevaluating if something's not working. And if things are really working, how can we make them work even better? Next, please. And then critical to supporting all of that is to ensure that you have good data management processes in place, both on the vessel and also on shore. We have a dedicated data team that ensures that we can track every operation, every deployment, and every sample that's collected. And all of our samples, particularly when it comes to species and identifying those species, are double and sometimes triple checked, so that every fish or every invertebrate that's collected is photographed, barcoded, and verified by an expert taxonomist. And our barcoding system allows us to track samples from collection through to multiple forms of analyses, with all of that information then stored on a central database sitting on our cloud operations at CSIRO. Next, please. And then at multiple times throughout surveys, as I said, we really reevaluate what we're doing. And at the end of each survey, we have built into our protocols a space for constant reevaluation of our protocols. And this includes debrief sessions after every voyage, reviewing specific protocols, and looking over our processes to determine if we're missing something or where things can be improved. Next, please. And what's also essential for us, particularly in maintaining the interest of our funders and also bringing in new stakeholders, is communications. It's super important for building understanding and relationships across those stakeholders that you're either engaging directly in the project or you might be delivering to. For really expensive projects like going to sea projects, it's super important to be able to communicate what you're doing, not only to keep your current funders engaged, but also to bring in interest more broadly. And for us as a national research agency, it's also super important that we engage more broadly with the community that's interested in marine research. We need to bring them along for the ride and also provide for continued support throughout the lifetime of the project. What you're seeing here is part of our dedicated webpage that covers the background of the project, why we're doing what we're doing, what will be the outputs and benefits for the project, who is involved, and now we're starting to provide preliminary results from the project. Next, please. So this slide is just really showing you what our original output from all of the modelling exercises that we did over the preliminary planning component of the project. That's on the left. That really allowed us to think about options for our survey design and allowed us to be able to choose our sample sites robustly so that we had a mix of repeating stations from the 1990s. We were also sampling areas within marine parks and outside of marine parks, and also within and outside of fisheries closures, and also included sites that would contribute to baselines of areas declared for offshore wind. The three panels more towards the right are the areas in the south, central and north of the survey area that we've sampled so far, with each of the four major gear types. I'd just like to highlight that in addition to what we're collecting for the project, we're also undertaking some substantial seabed mapping. And that's really important for us because we need to be able to map the areas that we're putting gear into to make sure that we don't lose the gear, but also that we're sampling the areas that we actually have prioritised to sample to make sure that we're actually putting our gear in the right place. But that seabed mapping exercise is contributing to the Oz Seabed project, which in turn is contributing to the Seabed 2030 program, which is also endorsed under the UN Decade. So this project is actually contributing to multiple programs under the decade. Next, please. So where are we overall? Sorry, go back one. We're halfway through the operational or data collecting phase of the project. Can you just go back one slide, please? With 2 voyages completed last year and earlier this year, and another 2 voyages scheduled for November this year and June next year. And then we get to the fun part, which is all of the analysis and write-up. We have multiple students involved, and that's part of our capacity building component of our project. They're starting to process their samples, and we'll have the first of those projects starting to deliver outputs by mid next year. We've also had a number of the project team providing preliminary results from physics, the biogeochemical and also biological components of the project at multiple conferences this year. The reality is that this project will probably take the larger part of the decade to fully deliver. This last slide that you're seeing here is just really to show the core group of people that's involved in the project. There's many more people that we're also collaborating with who've been involved in our voyages and will be involved in our coming 2 voyages as well. And just to emphasise that it really does take a village to raise a child like this. Projects like this don't come without a lot of engagement by a lot of people. So I'd just like to recognise all of those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. And my apologies again to you, for skipping your talk. Now we are open to Q&A session. Most of you have typed your questions in the Q&A, the question and answer chat box, and has been answered. So there is one question that has been raised by Louisa. Luisa, are you here on the platform? Can you address the question to whoever you want to address? Luisa? Are you around, Luisa? If not, I'll read Luisa's question. Are there any existing plan? Oh, hold on. Are there any existing plan or efforts in place to achieve an interoperability of data sets that can still acknowledge / respect / recognize the place-based nature of the EOV or EBV observations? Who would like to? Can I have Professor Masa Nakaoka to address this, and whoever would like to support, it will be most welcome to address this question.
Thank you. But I'm sorry, I don't have any information about concrete plan to do this. How about Karen? Do you have any idea or any plan for this question?
I would say absolutely there is a place for contextual observations, and that is really the primary aim of the Global Ocean Observing System, is to take those very place-based and contextually collected observations of the ecosystem, whether that be the physics, the biogeochemistry, or the biology, and bring those together. And how we do that is through ensuring that there's good specifications that back those observations, so that people know that if they're collecting an observation, whether that be physics, biogeochemistry, or biology, they know what are the guidelines for collecting those observations to ensure that there is that interoperability down the line. And that's also supported through organisations like OBPS that help us develop those data schemas and the data management pipelines that are needed to make sure that the observations that you might be collecting, for example, in my case off Southeast Australia, can be combined with observations that might be collected off Japan or Malaysia or off in the Mediterranean or off the coast of the US. And we can bring those together to truly develop something that is global and can provide a global understanding of what's going on in the ocean.
Okay, good. Thanks. How about Patricia? You have anything to top up or to add on?
Hey,
Yes.
well, I think between Masa and Karen, they have given a very comprehensive response. I just want to highlight that it's not trivial, and highlight the importance of collecting also the essential variables on a simultaneous way. The Global Ocean Observing System, as you mentioned, started in the 90s, but it was only until 2015 that biological observations were incorporated into the Ocean Observing System. So up to that moment, whatever biological information was separated from the physical information and put in separate databases. As Catherine explained, OBIS brought this back together with their environmental biological diversity data, which really, was a step forward in integration again, because you cannot make an interpretation of processes if you are separating the variables that you're measuring. So at the moment, if you want to look for, the platforms or where is the metadata behind the platforms that measure essential variables for the ocean, the physical and biogeochemical ones, you can go to JCOM, what formerly was JCOM Ops and today is Ocean Ops. It's hosted in France. And for biological observations, you can go to the Goose BioEco portal, which derived, it's actually powered also with a contribution of OBIS, but it's in a separate portal. And you can actually interrogate that portal of what monitoring programs are measuring each of the essential biological ocean variables. So I think I could put it on a chat, the Goose Biodiversity portal, so that you can have it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Patricia. How about anything from you, Anna?
Well, it's pretty much mostly given by Karen, Mathan, and Patricia. I would add that there is now the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission has now created another metadata portal that is federated basically, and it's really easy to connect for the ocean, and that's regardless of discipline. And it basically will allow, well, there's two components to it. One, it is a sustained metadata portal, and that it's that will connect in a very easy way to, you know, all the different data owners, data aggregators that want to, you know, be visible globally. It's not providing the data, it is basically the metadata of the programs that are happening. It is a federated system that will basically provide a window of where observations in the ocean are happening, who is doing it, and what are they collecting. So I would encourage you know, people that are collecting observations to have a look at Otis and the Ocean Info Hub. I'll put in the chat a link to it. And there is even information how you can connect, because that is going to allow us to assess who's doing what where and see where the gaps are. So, and you know, giving a very sort of good example why it is important that we can have that visibility is like, I'm sure everyone remembers the Deepwater Horizon, when there was like this big, you know, oil lake in the Gulf of Mexico. All of a sudden, they were, you know, asking who actually took observations in the Gulf of Mexico, who was doing what. Do we have a baseline? Did anyone sample somewhere around that area? And they didn't know. They had to basically take a detective sort of work to find out who was doing what. So in instances like that, it becomes really important that we have good visibility of what people are doing, because it also provides us the opportunity to coordinate and collaborate. So, you know, and avoid duplication as well. So maybe someone else is, you know, collecting similar information in an area of interest, and perhaps you can connect to that particular program and, you know, say, hey, we probably can collaborate this way. So there is at the moment some tools that are quite useful for the community, and I will encourage everyone to use it. And it is also, you know, having data standards and good practice on how we actually manage data is becoming more important now that we have to, you know, solve some of the challenges that we have for biodiversity.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. A last quick round of comments from the panelists. You know, on this, on the quiz question, just a short answer. How do we mature marine biodiversity observation in terms of, is there any low-hanging fruit, or is there any technologies can be used to enable an operational system? What can be leveraged? Can I start off with Patricia first?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. And we just finished not long ago the white paper for the challenge number 7, for which is expanding the global ocean observing system. And we speak also, of course, of maturing observations. It's I don't think it has one answer. Of course, the idea is that we want to expand to areas that are unobserved, where we have gaps. We want to strengthen the areas that currently have observations. We want to expand the number of variables. We want to make instruments be low cost so we can have more. We want to automatize as much as possibly can. So there's many things that you can do. So you can continue to strengthen what you have, but you also need to be aware that there are new things that need to be developed. But I think underlying all of this is capacity development, because you can create technologies, but you need the people to handle the technologies. Then the technologies will provide data. Then you need the people who can do something with the data. And by data, I don't mean just, developing papers. You actually need to transform the data into information that policymakers and any stakeholder may be able to use. That from a measurement of wave, winds, temperature, you can actually derive that into a societal application, which is, can I go to the beach and surf? Can I go to can I took my ship for fishing? So these kinds of application. So you have to continue to strengthen what we have. That's the message. But we also have to develop innovative solutions to actually expand our capacity for observations, making them easier, faster, more accessible, cheaper. And we need a workforce of people underlying all of this.
That's great, Patricia. You hit it right on the spot, answering everything. How about you, Anna? Quick.
So I guess it becomes important, I think, to have good communication and engagement with end users, the people, the public, on why it is important. Like ocean literacy becomes very important in that respect. I think it is something that can be strengthened, because if we need that workforce, citizen science is an incredibly powerful tool that we can use. But for that, we need good ocean literacy. And also we need good ocean literacy for policymakers, decision makers, managers, and all that to really drive home the message that we really need coordination, that we really need ocean observations in order to be able to manage what we have. And then another area where I think we need to strengthen a bit more is on integration. How do we integrate the different disciplines, and how do we bring transdisciplinarity as well in ocean observing? Because I think there are now several programs that are bringing social scientists in, and I think it is an important component, and we need to learn how to interact. And another one is indigenous knowledge and local knowledge as well. It's super important. How do we actually integrate that in? Because it differs a bit, but it is very important information on how do we actually learn together and combine those different sets of knowledges to really solve some of the problems we have.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Masa, we have only 1 minute left for you to give your thoughts before the session close.
Actually, the thing I wanted to talk is already Patricia and Anna already mentioned, so I have not special things to add. But as both of them mentioned, networking and capacity building is really important, especially raising a network next generation scientists and practitioners in developing countries are really key for conserving the global marine biodiversity. So we need to keep on this effort. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Masa. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank all the panelists and the audience, the participants who are with us today for supporting the program. I think there's more to discuss. In future, we'll have to ask for a longer program, longer session, right? 2 hours rather than 1.5 hours. Thank you to all the panelists. Back to you, Joanna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Do
Can now
you want,
close it.
yeah, do you want to have a group photo? Just a quick one.
Okay, so let's open our cameras.
Just for record. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one moment.
Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you very much.
I already took a photo. I will send you by email. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.